Okay, we want to get started today. My name is Jenny Dopp, and I'm the director of CaringTide. And we are a disability planning company. And today we're going to talk about unlocking potential, navigating challenges, and securing the future. I know all of us have that question of what will happen to families when we're no longer able to care for our loved ones who have a disability. And so we're excited to present this information to you today and to be a resource for you. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We would ask that everyone keep themselves on mute during the presentation. There is a chat feature at the bottom of your Zoom account. And if you have questions, please put your questions in the chat and we will make sure to address those. And again, this webinar will be recorded. We will email this out to you so that you'll have it for future reference. And I just wanted to read this disclaimer slide this is one of the cultural laws of CaringTide. We really believe in this, and that CaringTide respects every individual's right to express who they are. In one-on-one discussions, we will use person-first or identity-first language based on the person's preference. In group settings, we will use a mix of the two in the hopes of having everyone feel like they are being included and respected. I want to introduce you today to our speaker. Brady Murray is our founder, and he has a vision for CaringTide, and it's a personal vision. He is a father of multiple children with disabilities. He is also the founder of a nonprofit and also the founder of CaringTide. And he's also, in his work life, a chartered special needs consultant. So not only does he walk the walk, but he talks the talk, and he understands what the disability community is like and what the needs are for our families. So I want to turn the time over to Brady, and we're excited to hear Brady's message.
It's great to be here with everybody. Thank you for joining. Super excited to be able to share about something that I am extremely passionate about. As many of us know, there are 42 million Americans in our country that are disabled. 7 million of them have a cognitive disability and are dependent on a caregiver. These, in my opinion, are the most overlooked and underserved demographic in our country. And honestly, for all of us here, I just want to let you know that we are not alone, that CaringTide is here to help, that this is a passion. This is my life's vision to be able to assist and serve this community. Our vision is to give everyone in our community, no matter their background, the opportunity to receive the support and resources needed to realize their full purpose and ultimately rise up and sing the song that they are meant to sing. Allow me to share just a little bit on my own personal story. My story starts with a love story, as many wonderful stories do. I met my beautiful wife, Andrea, 22 years ago, and honestly, I can say it was love at first sight. One of the things that drew me to Andrea, and something that was just such an amazing part about Andrea, was how she treated children, in particular, the underdog or those underprivileged children. I just loved how kind she was to them. Shortly after we were married, we welcomed our first child into our family, a beautiful girl. Shortly thereafter, we welcomed our first son. I will never forget what that was like. I was so excited to be able to welcome Nash into our life. I had all of these visions of what we would be able to do together in hiking and fishing and camping, and especially playing baseball. We are a big baseball family. And so the morning that Nash was born, Andrea woke me up at 2 a.m. with those famous words saying, "I think it's time." I jumped out of bed. I grabbed our bags. We rushed to the delivery room, to the hospital, and everything went amazing. The delivery was perfect. And before I knew it, I could see my son. He was there. He looked perfect. He had 10 fingers, 10 toes. I was taking pictures. It was a very, very special occasion. But at the same time, I also noticed that the doctor and the nurses that were there, that were attending to Nash, were whispering back and forth. And I sensed something in my heart, like something might be wrong. About 10 minutes after Nash was born, the doctor came over to me. He had a concerned look on his face. He put his arm around my shoulder and he walked me to the very back of the delivery room. And he said something that changed my life forever. He said, "Brady, we believe that your son has Down syndrome." This was the first time that I had heard of this. I had no expectation of this. And honestly, the feelings that I were feeling were very, very raw. I immediately became emotional. I remember feeling fear. And then I remember thinking I needed to go tell my wife exactly what the doctor had just told me. I was emotional. I walked over to Andrea. I knelt next to her bed. I looked her in the eye and I said, honey, the doctor just told us that Nash has Down syndrome. Together we cried. We tried to process this. It was a very, very rough couple of hours, days, weeks, and honestly, even months as we were processing what this exactly meant to our family. I actually remember in the delivery room taking out my phone and Googling Down syndrome, which honestly was a big mistake because what pulled up is not exactly what a brand new father having just received a diagnosis should be reading. I continued to feel just an overwhelming feeling of fear. And just with all that information that I was processing, it was a very scary moment. But I remember one overriding feeling that I had was that I am going to dedicate my life to protecting my son. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that this boy is okay and that nothing ever happens to him in the sense of being hurt, being bullied, and just helping him to be able to avoid any of those fears that I was feeling inside of my heart. That was 17 years ago. Fast forward to where we are right now, and Nash is a superstar. He's a rock star. I love everything about my son. We have many amazing experiences, as I'm sure many of you also have, as it relates to your loved one who has a special need. And one experience I want to share with you right now, Nash loves his mom so much. And when his mom recently ran the Boston Marathon, he was infatuated with her medal. He put it on and he would not take that thing off. In fact, I remember the day after Andrea got back from Boston, Nash got up really early one morning and got ready to be able to go to school. And he had on his winter coat, which was kind of strange because it was April and he had it zipped all the way up to the very tippy top. But you know what? Hey, Nash, you do you. So we took him to school, dropped him off. And when we picked him up, he had all of his teachers there with him and a few of his classmates. And he came walking out, and I can see why they were with him. Nash was wearing his mother's finisher's medal for the Boston Marathon. All of his teachers came up and they were so excited to hear about Nash running the Boston Marathon. He'd been telling all of the school that year or that day that he had just finished the Boston Marathon. And that's an experience that's almost like a daily occurrence in the Murray household. Going forward, however, I also know that each of you are familiar with this aspect of raising a loved one who has a disability, and that's that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. This is a very, very unique and special journey that we are all on. And honestly, as a family, some of the darkest moments that we have ever had as a couple and as a family were on this special needs journey. I recognize that Down syndrome in many ways is a more simple diagnosis. And honestly, I know that there are many of you that have very unique and often very extremely difficult circumstances that are probably far more than anything that I've even experienced in my own situation. And for that, I respect and admire each of you, especially those full-time caretakers, in particular, the moms. I have seen firsthand Andrea and what she does for our family, in particular for her boy that has Down syndrome. And my heart goes out for all of you. And I'm so thankful for your service to our community and to our loved ones that have a disability. I see your effort. I see your worry. And I want to tell you that you guys are doing an amazing job. Your efforts are making a difference. Our goal at CaringTide is to lighten your load. Our purpose at CaringTide is to be able to bring peace of mind to you, to be able to support the millions of moms and dads and caregivers that are out there on this journey. So, with that being said, who's ready to dive in? I am going to share with you 3 timeless principles that take a family from surviving to thriving. I have been many times now in survival mode. And by applying these principles that I'm going to share with you right now, we have experienced, and I've found that other families are also able to experience going from surviving to thriving. So, principle number 1, an awesome principle: conquer your clownfish. Now, I'm sure many of you are looking at this and saying, Brady, what in the world does conquer your clownfish mean? Well, allow me to share with you. First and foremost, I have a confession. So, my name is Brady, and I am a clownfish. Let me explain. I realized that I'm a clownfish after watching the movie Finding Nemo. You guys all remember Marlin, that was Nemo's dad, is an overprotective father who has a son that happens to have what he refers to as a lucky fin. I want to show just a couple of clips from this movie in demonstrating a clownfish in real time.
It's okay, Daddy's here. Daddy's got you. I promise I will never let anything happen to you. Nemo! Nemo! Nemo, don't move! Don't move! You'll never get out of there yourself. I'll do it. All right, where's the brake? You feel a brake? Sometimes you can't tell because fluid is rushing to the area. Now, any rushing fluids? Are you woozy? No. How many stripes do I have? Fine. Answer the stripe question. 3. No! See, something's wrong with you. I have 1, 2, 3. That's all I have? Oh, you're okay. How's the lucky fin?
Lucky.
Let's see. Are you sure you want to go to school this year? Because there's no problem if you don't. You can wait 5 or 6 years.
I do, can I?
I would feel better if you go play over on the sponge beds. That's where I would play.
What's wrong with this fin? He looks funny. Ow!
He was born with it, kids. We call it his lucky fin. Just so you know, he's got a little fin. I find if he's having trouble swimming, I let him take a break, 10, 15
Dad
minutes.
says it's not safe.
Nemo! No!
Dad?
Ugh. You know you can't swim well.
I can swim fine, Dad, okay?
No, it's not okay. You shouldn't be anywhere near here. Okay, I was right. You know what? We'll start school in a year or 2.
No, Dad!
You're not ready, and you're not coming back until you are. You think you could do these things, but you just can't, Nemo.
All right. That's like watching a real life movie home video of me when I was raising Nash in his younger years. And so allow me to share what I mean by this conquering your clownfish and with a real life experience that I had. So my boys love sports, and my boys, we had moved to Utah, and my boys really wanted to go to a Utah Jazz game. Honestly, I was a little bit hesitant. And so we had a very young son, as you can see, sitting on my lap, Ridge. Then we had Nash, and I just wasn't sure exactly how Nash was going to do in that type of an environment. We'd never been in one before quite like that, but I decided to give it a try. The emotion I felt that night, ironically enough, going into that arena was very similar to the emotion that I felt the day that Nash was born. It was an emotion of wanting to protect my son, and that was as strong as ever. The game started out okay, but as the noise grew, I could sense that Nash was becoming a little bit more uncomfortable with what was transpiring. Throughout the night, it was touch and go. And honestly, it wasn't a great experience for me. Nash did okay, but I just didn't feel great about exposing my son to something that was honestly just a sensory overload. I left that game that night having decided in my mind that honestly, sporting events were probably just a little bit too much for my son. Now, with that being said, my the love for the sports that my boys had didn't end that night. In fact, it grew, especially their love for the Atlanta Braves. So these boys are fanatics of the Atlanta Braves. And what I'd like to do is actually show you a video and an example of just how fanatical they are. This is real footage that was captured from my Ring camera in our basement during a Braves game when their favorite player hit a home run.
Oh, wait, did I catch it?
I love Nash's comment, best day ever, when Ronald Acuna hit a home run. And so my love for the Braves, or the love that my boys have for the Braves, honestly stems from my love for the Braves. My childhood was a lot like theirs. I watched a ton of games. My favorite player was Del Murphy, and then it was Chipper Jones. And I remember clearly in 1999 when the Braves made it to the World Series and then ultimately lost to the New York Yankees, effectively breaking my heart. I remember that year, 1999, in October, I made a solemn vow that if the Braves ever made it to the World Series again, I would go to a game in Atlanta and watch my favorite team play. Fast forward more than 20 years later, that magical year for the Braves finally happened. And so me and my boys watched nearly every single game that season. My boys knew about my commitment to go to the World Series if the Braves made it, and they were all fully committed to go with me. Nash and Ridge especially wanted to go. I didn't want to let Nash down. And so throughout the playoffs, I had full intention of going to the game and probably even taking Ridge, my oldest son, or my second oldest son, but I didn't want to take Nash. I knew Nash couldn't go, but I didn't want to tell him and let him down. So when the Braves finally secured that final victory over the Dodgers in the championship game to lead them to the World Series, we celebrated like it was never, like we'd never celebrated before. And in that moment, I remember Nash saying, I'm going to World Series. He just kept yelling it, I'm going to World Series. And finally, I couldn't take it anymore. And I said, Bud, like, don't you remember? Like, you don't like going to these games. Like, you don't like the noise, and you don't like going to these stadiums, and you don't like going to sports games. And I remember telling him this and telling him the things that I believed he didn't like. And I saw that light in his eyes just dim. And I saw him follow his dad's lead and say, I don't like going to the games. And he just was following in my footsteps. And it absolutely broke my heart. I remember thinking, this is wrong, and I am wrong. And I walked over to Nash and I knelt down in front of him and I grabbed his face in my hands and I said, buddy, I am so sorry. Don't listen to what your dad just said, because you are going to the World Series. And no matter what, I was going to find a way to be able to make that happen. Well, to the World Series, we did go, and Nash did amazing. The reality is that he had it in him all along to be able to go to these games. But in the end, it was me, his clownfish father, that was holding him back. And I saw so many other areas in his life that Nash was capable of doing so much more. But it was my fear of him being disappointed, being bullied, him being hurt potentially, that held him back from being able to truly realize that full potential. Well, the Braves won the game that we attended, and they went on to win the World Series that year. And I learned a lot that day. Most importantly, I learned that my son is capable of so much more. And honestly, it was just me that was holding him back. I started to see this pattern in other parents that were our friends, that were our peers. And we talked a lot about that. And that actually inspired me to create a podcast that I'd encourage you to look up, called Conquering Your Clownfish. This is a podcast that's purpose is to be able to share inspiring stories of parents and caregivers who are honestly on this journey out there conquering your clownfish. Some of those past guests that we've had that are pretty amazing individuals within our community would be Kimberly Dowdle, Misty Coy Snyder, Kaylee Steinmeist, and one that we just had who is an amazing mom in the autism community is Stephanie Hanrahan. These are amazing people. There's many people like them that are on this podcast. I'd encourage you to check it out because there's some fun stories on conquering your clownfish, which takes us to principle number 2. Principle number 2 is tackle the difficult questions. Allow me to elaborate. Nash loves school. It's his entire life. He's a sophomore right now. It wasn't too long ago that Andrea asked me a question that stopped me in my tracks. It was a question that honestly I didn't have an answer for, and I hadn't really thought a lot about. It was a question of, Brady, Nash loves school so much. What happens when the school bus stops coming? This caused us to start to ask a lot of other questions as well. Some of those questions were things like, what happens when Nash turns 18 and is considered an adult, yet is still at the level of a 7-year-old? Will Nash be able to go to college or vocational school someday? Can we prepare Nash to maybe live on his own someday? Will Nash be able to be married someday? These were some of those questions that we had. And then when we went into these questions, it led me down a path to a question that honestly is one of the most terrifying questions I have ever faced as a parent. And this question came to my mind after I saw this video.
I don't think we had a good time. I don't think so.
Just like a dad does. Son, you need to shave. Well, I watched this video and I saw much of my own life in this video. You see, every day that I come home, Nash comes running down the hall when I come through that back door, and he comes running down the hall and he says, "Daddy, Daddy," and he gives me a great big hug, even though he hasn't seen me for 8 hours is all. It seems like he's giving me a hero's welcome. Well, he did that when he was 8. He does that now at 17. I know he'll do that at 36, and he'll probably even do that when he's 56. And then there's going to be a day when Dad doesn't come walking through the back door. And Nash's caretaker, his caregiver, his daddy is no longer there. And that led me to the most terrifying question that I've faced as a parent. And that is, what will happen to my child when I'm no longer here to be able to take care of them? As I started to look at this and ponder this, I actually found that there was a lot of individuals that were feeling very much the same way that I was. Kate Swenson on her Instagram channel just recently posted actually this post. She said, "I had a revelation today, one that rocked me. I have a 13-year-old, amazing yet complicated son with severe nonverbal autism. And lately he has really been struggling with the evenings or in the evenings. Most have no idea. Many probably wouldn't believe it. And today I realized it's not the meltdowns that are breaking me. It's the worry of who will do this after I'm gone. I'm terrified." This post had over 4,000 likes, over 270 comments. Some of those comments were these. This individual said, "I'm terrified for the future of my 3-year-old daughter. Who will love and care for her like I do?" This individual shared, "I feel this. I have 2 boys on the spectrum, and it brings me to tears at the thought of it." Well, honestly, guys, this is why we created CaringTide. This is our purpose, to answer this question that is ever pressing on our minds on what will happen to our loved one when we are not able to care for them any longer. This honestly can be fairly complicated in how to answer these. For me, I found that I needed professional help when tackling these questions. With the help of professionals, I was able to answer the hard questions involving all of these things that you see on this slide: special needs trust, healthcare, guardianship, education, employment, social life, legal matters, housing, income planning, and obviously the financial aspect, which would include things like ABLE accounts. These were things that I wasn't necessarily versed in at the time, but I knew that these were super, super important aspects to be able to provide for my family. And again, this is the purpose behind CaringTide. And so at CaringTide, one of the roles that is so important is that of our caregiver coaches. Jenny, who you all met earlier, who introduced me, is a perfect example of a caregiver coach. Jenny is experienced as a mom in raising her son, Jackson, who is now into his 20s, but also as a professional. She's very experienced with more than a decade's worth of experience working with families just like ours and helping them to be able to navigate through this journey. The good that is transpiring for families that are working with CaringTide is because of our amazing caregiver coaches, just like Jenny. So that leads us to principle number 3, and one of my favorite, probably my favorite, and that is that is when you allow yourself to get caught up in a cause and what happens after that. So shortly after receiving receiving Nash's diagnosis, Andrea and I believed in our hearts that the best way forward was to serve the pain that we knew best. It was through following this that we learned a life lesson around getting caught up in a cause. Here's the life lesson that we learned. We learned that when we allow ourselves to get caught up in a cause bigger than ourselves, we will witness miracles. This is an eternal principle, and I know it is absolutely true because I have witnessed it firsthand. Allow me to share. We learned while getting caught up in this cause of serving our community, we learned about what happens to a child who has a disability in many developing countries. When we learned about this, we saw images of children just like this that were tucked away in orphanages all throughout the world. When we saw images of this nature, we knew we had to help. In 2013, we founded the nonprofit Rod's Heroes. The purpose of Rod's Heroes is to inspire families to answer the call to adopt a child with Down syndrome or other special needs. We saw firsthand what happens when a child who is in an orphanage gets adopted. And we saw pictures like this of before and after. You see the light that is not there, and you see what happens when a family answers that call to be able to adopt. And that's the purpose of Rod's Heroes. Most recently, our work took us to a very rural part of Colombia. When we were in Colombia, we were in this area that we went to meet a child that was in foster care. When we went into the foster home, we were talking with this child and we were meeting this child, and it was such a beautiful little girl that we were meeting. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw in this little room and in this window, this little boy who was peeking up and over the window, trying to see what was going on out there in these weird accents that he could hear in this weird language. Well, this boy had a bright, bright countenance about him. And I asked the foster parents, who is that? And they said, well, this is another boy that we are fostering. And I asked the caseworker, do you know anything about this boy? And they said, actually, this boy is not even on our registry. We don't even know who this boy is. Well, we learned that this boy, his name is Christian. He has been in foster care his entire life. He has brittle bone disease. As we went in and we visited with Christian, this boy was amazing. And we were able to get him on the registry to be able to start advocating for him. A few months later, a family answered the call to be able to adopt him. And here you see Christian with his family, his forever family. What a blessing he is to that family. Well, this work led us to our own adoption story that I'd like to share with you. Andrea and I had 4 biological children that were just amazing. Nash was our oldest son. We had 1 girl and 3 boys, and life seemed great. In our hearts, though, something told us that we should consider adoption, and not only adoption, but the adoption of a child that has Down syndrome. We were led to look in Asia, and in particular in China. It was there that we learned about a little boy that at the age of guesstimated to be 6 months old was found abandoned on a street corner in a city of 14 million people in Tianjin, China. The authorities were called, they came, they took this little boy to an orphanage. They ran a story in the newspaper to see if anybody knew who this boy was. This is the actual picture of Cooper in 2012 when that story ran in the Tianjin Times. Well, when Andrea and I found out about Coop, he was 4, and we answered that call to be able to adopt him. This is a picture of us just a few days after we had met him in China. And this boy has been also the light and life of our family. Coop, as you can imagine, because he's a Murray, loves baseball. We like to call him Super Cooper. In fact, Coop plays on a typical team. He's a very good little athlete. And by me trying to get over this conquering your clownfish, I've really had a chance to be able to give Coop as many opportunities as he wants to take to be able to play at all different levels and play at all different teams. Well, shortly, or just a year ago, we witnessed another miracle in the work that we were getting involved in and advocating for the kids that have special needs that need a family. Cooper was invited to be able to throw out the first pitch at a Chicago Cubs game at Wrigley Field. We didn't know how this was going to go. I was a nervous wreck, and I remember asking Coop, you nervous? And he's like, nope. He goes right out there. He threw a perfect pitch after wowing the crowd with waving and doing what Coop does best. And when that happened, we saw lightning happen or strike again just 2 weeks later when the Boston Red Sox invited Cooper to come to Fenway and throw out the first pitch. Well, the purpose of this is to be able to inspire others to consider opening their hearts to adoption, the adoption in particular of a child that has a disability. And this campaign has actually led us down the path of Cooper being able to throw out the first pitch in all 30 Major League Baseball stadiums for that purpose of inspiring families to consider adoption. It's also an opportunity to be able to show the world that each of us have a purpose, especially those especially those that society says are disabled. They especially have a work to be able to do. This work we know is best accomplished in and through the service of others. Because of what a blessing Cooper has been to our family, we have opened our hearts to adoption. In fact, we've welcomed 7 children into our family thus far. Through the miracle of adoption, we have 11 children now for those that are counting. And honestly, 11 kids is even a little weird here in Utah, but hey, we go with it. And it's just a testament and a reminder that when we allow ourselves to get caught up in a cause, we will witness miracles. And so our goal at CaringTide is to be able to help our families that we are working with to be able to overcome and not just go from surviving, but truly become a part of their life to go to thriving. Ultimately, we want to allow our families to be able to witness their own miracles as they get caught up in the causes that they are passionate about. So as a quick recap, we talked about conquering your clownfish. We talked about the second principle of tackling the difficult questions, and the last principle, which is getting caught up in a cause. And so as we're nearing the end of this webinar today, I want to thank all of you. And so we are so thankful for your attendance in our webinar today. In the chat, you will see a consultation link. And so for all participants in today's workshop, we are offering a free consultation with a caregiver coach to be able to discuss your individual situation. So you can scan this QR code that's on the page, or you can also click on that link. In that consultation, you'll be given the opportunity to discuss these ever important topics, as well as any others that you have weighing on your mind. And again, this will be with an experienced and loving and caring caregiver coach. So step 1 would be very simple. It truly is simply to meet with a caregiver coach. Step 2 would be to be able to create a disability roadmap. And so if you decide to work with our coaches, we'll create a personalized plan for you. Our goal is to give you the resources you need to put your house in order. Together, we will build a plan that will take you step by step through the process. And as your coach, we can provide you with a practical lifeline, a blueprint, if you may, that can help get you through those hard experiences. And more than anything, give you the peace of mind that you deserve. That's step number 2. And last, but definitely not least, is step number 3. So once steps 1 and 2 are complete, you will have a perfect position, you'll be in a perfect position to begin to thrive in ways that you have never imagined before. And as we've shared before, we believe that each one of us have a song that we are meant to sing. This applies to our loved ones with a disability, but honestly, it also applies to you. And as part of the work that our caregiver coaches do, it's not only work for those that have a disability, but it's also for you to be able to help you to sing that song that you're meant to sing as well. So I'm going to turn the time back over to Jenny for a brief Q&A. But again, thank you so much for all of you and your attendance today.
Thank you, Brady. That was a wonderful message, and we appreciate all of those personal stories. I know that I related to it. I'm the mom of Jackson, who's 23, and I can think back to all of those times of where I was at each of those stages. And now as a mom who's helping her son enter into adulthood, I really have a lot of those questions that we're working through, not because I don't know where to go for the answers, but because I have to do it on Jackson's timetable. And that's one of the things that I will help you with as your caregiver coach, is to try to help you fine-tune your plan, identify those pain points, and help you figure out the resources that you need. And CaringTide's an organization that serves across the country. So no matter if you're in Utah or if you're in Vermont, I can find resources to help you. So I wanted to open it up to you. Do you have any questions for us, either about our organization or how we might be able to benefit your family? You can just go ahead and unmute if you have a question. And I know we have people in a lot of different stages of life. I spoke with one mom yesterday, and she has, a young son who they're still figuring out exactly how their autism diagnosis is going to impact them. Some of you might be retired, some of you might be an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent, and we have resources for you as well of how you can be an ally and a supporter in this community. And if you don't want to unmute, you can also type your question in the chat or your comments.
And also, sometimes it's best to be able to ask those questions in that individual setting. And so if you'd prefer just to do that in a one-on-one, we absolutely are happy to do that as well.
That link that we have in the chat goes directly to my calendar, so we can find a time that works best for you. And if you want to message me as well, you can put your contact information in the chat, and I can find a time that might be outside of what you see on the calendar. We want to find a time that works best for you.
Looks like there was one question on guardianship that came up.
Yes, so guardianship is going to differ based upon the state that you live in. And so, for instance, in Utah with my son Jackson, I can start preparing for guardianship as soon as he's 17 and a half. But we would want to look at where you live and what the laws are in your state and which safety and security option might be the best for you, whether that's guardianship or possibly conservatorship. If you're in California, maybe you need a power of attorney, or maybe you need to be introduced to a concept called supported decision making, where you can help your loved one make choices in a safe way and a protected way, depending upon the laws of your state. So we would definitely look at that and see what the laws of your state are. And while we are not attorneys, we can give you those resources and tools, and then also connect you with attorneys that would be able to help you with that. So I'm not an attorney, so I want to make sure I'm very clear. I'm not going to give you advice as far as what you should do. What I'm going to do is give you all of the resources and then connect you with the attorney so that you can make the best decision for yourself and your loved one. Great question. Guardianship's hard. And you know what? It's an emotional decision too. Jackson, my son, is 23, and I haven't finished guardianship for him because he has a foot in both worlds. And so I'm really trying to figure out which option is the best for him. And we also have something called limited guardianship, where I can just get guardianship over maybe medical or financial, or maybe his housing, where I don't need a full guardianship for Jackson. So we'll go through that together in our consultation and figure out what might be the best option for your family.
I have a question, follow up.
Yeah, go ahead.
We started doing the trust work, and the first thing came up with guardianship of our son. He's going to turn 9, and I have a very large family, and he's a special needs adoption. And I hate to say it, nobody wants to be his guardian. And so we don't have any outside friends because they all did adoption of special needs. So their plate is full. How do you find that person? Right now, people love him, but they can't handle him after an hour. So is there any way to, there's no answer till we find that. We're not a young chick, we're turning 67, and there is a Kurt Warner housing for 18 and older, but I got to find out the financing. But nobody wants to step up and do it. Most of my friends do adopt special needs, 10 or 11 kids. They can't take them. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the neighbors tolerate him. They don't know his needs. He's brain damage from, we're in Arizona. We have 15,000 kids every year up for adoption for meth or cocaine or heroin brain damage. And he's a meth kid. And there's no off switch. He's up early and goes to bed really late. We've learned to adapt our whole life. I've raised already a large family, and everything I thought I knew about kids went out the window, and also how to, he's OCD. So you have to really do it his way, or you have these meltdowns, and it's okay. But is there any way, or maybe asking a no answer question?
No,
Did you
I can touch on
do you
that.
run, do you run across people that's like, there's nobody matching up with him. You know what I'm saying?
Well, when you're looking at the scenario where there's 7 million families that have an individual that is dependent, that is receiving caregiver services, there's a lot of variety that we see as we meet with families. And so you had touched on one thing in relation to some potential housing as he gets older, but also I would say that part of it really would be a lot can happen between now and the time in which your son reaches age of 18. And those are
Okay.
things that we would be looking at just to be able to help develop and help him to ultimately sing that song that he's meant to sing. But that's one of the advantages that we could have as we have our one-on-one conversation.
I like to say about coaching because I'm piecemealing his healthcare and physical therapy, occupational therapy. He doesn't get DDD. There's 5 qualifications to get DDD. He's not one of them. They don't have for FES or mental damage from drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And so and I had to train the occupational therapy and the physical therapy because he looks fine. He looks great on the outside, but he can't change directions.
Yeah.
And she's starting to realize he can play one position in a soccer field, but if you put him on the other side, he's totally have to start all over again.
Yeah.
Yes, he can play tennis, but you have to break it down in such minute steps. Then he gets it. He's the best ever. But trying to find the coach to break it down that small has been very challenging. And we've been doing okay. He's not, and I found out from thank God for Facebook. Everybody who has one of these kids haven't got past first grade reading. And guess what? We're on a 3rd year of first grade reading. When I read that, I broke in tears because we just ate and spent a lot of money on a tutor, and she couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
She's so used to the PSAT, SAT kids. I work with special ed. Well, I hate to say it, Down syndrome are a lot smarter than Christian.
And that's one of the things that I had shared. I recognize that Down syndrome is one unique aspect. We also did foster care and adopted 2 little girls through foster care that came from actually very similar situation to what it sounds like your son came in. And so we're experiencing some similar things. And so what I would suggest is scheduling that consultation with us. Let's go into depth as it relates to your situation and see what we can't come up with. So
that'd be great because right now the experts in mental health care, they're young, graduated from college, and don't know what the hell they're talking about. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I adopted 2 others, FES, and that was a whole nother gamut. And I realized nobody knows the hell. I got to get the expert of FES of the United States. He came out and spoke to us. And I took that DVD to high school. They all watched. They go, "Oh, we're doing this wrong."
Yeah.
They will die. All FES die before 26 years old. They make poor decisions all the time. You can't stop it. Once they realize that in that high school, he's now have a police officer escorting him from room to room.
Yeah.
I'm 4 houses from Marcos, and they have to get a bus, pick him up, drive him to 4 houses, and have somebody escort him in. He can't make it in. And people don't understand that.
I appreciate you sharing that. And like I say, let's get that scheduled out. I
Thank you
actually
so
just
much.
saw another question just come up that
Okay, I'll let you go. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful question that says, how do you set up a special needs trust? Can you really trust a professional to manage your adults' finances? And thank you. So that's a very good question. That's a very important part of the work that we would be doing. And that would be surrounding putting together the team that ultimately is going to be able to care for your loved one, if and when that time comes when he would be fully dependent and not have you as a caregiver. And so a special needs trust is one of the ways in which that can be done. But there are other ways in which you can make sure to safeguard the finances for your child, for your loved one. And those are things that we would talk about in depth. But that is one of the most common topics that comes up, ironically enough, in our consultations. Jenny, I don't know if there was anything that you would add to that.
No, I think it's great to understand the components. I know that when we were looking at setting up, we just thought we just needed a will. That's what we thought that we needed when we were looking at preparing for the future. And then we understood how Jackson if he's going to qualify for things like Medicaid waivers or Social Security, that we need to make sure he doesn't have more than $2,000 in his name in assets. Otherwise, it could jeopardize his eligibility for those benefits. And so if we were to pass away and our home would go into our beneficiaries' names of those 4 children, then that's an asset in Jackson's name, which could then make him lose his benefits. So we then understood that we needed to establish an estate plan, put our home into a trust, identify an executor, identify somebody like what was talked about earlier with guardianship, who's going to kind of control those finances. We don't necessarily want to put that on our oldest daughter. And so we found ways to identify other people that can help us. So it is a process, and it's something that you want to build and create based upon the needs of your family. What would work for my family might not necessarily work for yours. And that's why it's great to have that caregiver coach to go through and help you identify exactly what your family situation is, what are your pain points, and how can we find the right resource for your family.
Yep. Great question. Thank you for sharing that. Any other questions? All right. You want to wrap us up, Jenny?
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, this webinar will be emailed out to you, so watch for that. And we'll also send the consultation link with that, so that if you want to think about this for a moment and try to identify if this might be a good fit for you, that link will be in that email as well. And again, you can always reach us at caringtide.com. You can also follow us on our social accounts. We'll start posting more of our resources and tools to kind of get you thinking. There's a lot to think about. Things like person-centered planning. What is self-determination? What is having high expectations for your loved one? What are the resources in your state? Adaptive sports. What about your IEP if they're in school? Is your IEP working for the best way possible for your loved one? We can go through all of those things with you. So again, thank you so much for taking your lunch hour and joining us today. We appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you here again. We'll be having another webinar next Tuesday, April the 30th at noon Mountain Time. And that's where we'll go into more of the specifics. We'll cover things like your estate plan, Medicaid, Social Security, letter of intent, guardianship. So if you want to come back for a little bit more of teaching and specifics, please join us and watch for that email as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.